Mom and Jeff, mute
Hello,
your
everybody.
mute your mic.
Now, I'm going to ask everybody, please, I'm going to ask everybody to mute your microphone and keep your microphone muted for the duration. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the chat facility so that you can ask questions and make comments. And sorry for the delay in getting started. Does everybody see the chat facility at the bottom of the page? You can click on that, and a little block will appear on the right hand side, or someplace in this. You can move it to the right hand side, and I would like everyone to use liberal use of the chat facility for this presentation. And so I'm Marty Cook, and we're going to, I'm still admitting people, sorry, I'm doing two things at once here. And we're going to be talking today about Binah Winery, a small winery, actually a urban winery in Allentown. And we have 37 participants so far, and still people are coming along. And we have 3 wines today, which you obviously know. And if you don't have your wines open, if you intend to open them all and taste along with us, we're going to taste the Chardonnay first, and then the Stella, and then finally the Chambourcin. So you may want to be about the business of opening those up, and while we're talking, and I've got the owner of Binah Winery with me, Kevin Dana. Kevin and I became acquainted in the fall of 2014. He's going to give you the entire backstory of his winemaking history and how he got into this, and his passion for it, and the fact that it's a dream of his, that a dream fulfilled. And I still have some more people being admitted, and then we'll taste as we go. He'll indicate at which point we will start tasting. Actually, since you and Kevin has a PowerPoint, and he's going to, I'm going to turn this show over to Kevin. And again, please keep your microphones muted. I will be prompting him with some questions, and we will be reading the comments aloud. So without further ado, Kevin, introduce yourself and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Marty. I'm Kevin Dana, correct pronunciation of the name and correct pronunciation of Binah Winery. Marty has correct, it's Binah, rhymes with Tina. Thank you all for attending. I'm really excited to be doing this. Thank you to the PA Wine Society and Marty Cook for hosting it, sponsoring this event and making it happen. So as you said, we're going to be tasting through 3 wines, which we'll get to shortly, the Chardonnay, the Stella, and the Chambourcin. The 2 whites should be served chilled. So if you've got them warm at this point, I would put them in the freezer and hope for the best. The Chambourcin will be slightly chilled. So, 5 to 10 minutes in the fridge would be sufficient. We're looking for low 60 degrees on that. So slightly below room temperature here in December. So what I'm going to do is share the screen. We have a bunch of images that we're going to go through as I go through this here. So we're going to start actually. Share. And hopefully everybody can see a picture here. We're going to start with a little pop quiz. So if anybody can name what this wine region is, where is this in the world? You can type your answers in the chat box, and then Marty will let me know here in a minute what the guesses are, or if somebody thinks they know the answer. So we're going to have a chance, like I said, to taste through a few of our wines, our award-winning wines here this afternoon, and we'll get to that shortly. First, I want to sort of go through, fast forward through the backstory of Binah Winery and me and how I got all into this and how we came to this day. And then, you know, look at some of the things that are going on right now, some of the current wines we're working on right now, and things we're going to be doing in the future.
Kevin, we have guesses. Napa Valley was first, then Italy, then Israel, then Italy.
Those are all very good guesses. None of them are correct. If you excuse us, like somebody's going by with a pallet jack outside. It's pretty loud. Usually we don't have much activity here in the winery building on Sunday, but
somebody's guessing Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Well, if you look in the background, actually, here's another. This is another image of the same place. We don't have any mountains like that in Pennsylvania.
I'm getting guesses for France, or South Africa, and Argentina now.
Yeah. Is there any more guesses? Or is that?
Here's another one, Utah. Now we're growing.
Well, there are wineries in all 50 states now, so.
Yes, there are.
It's not a bad guess. So no, none of those are correct. This is actually the Cucamonga Valley in Southern California. It's about 40 miles east of Los Angeles. And in the first half of the 20th century, about 100 years ago, this place was basically, they had Italian immigrants that came to this area, and it looked a lot like Italy to them. So those were good guesses. And they basically turned a desert wasteland into a cultivated paradise. And at the time, they claimed that these were the largest vineyards in the world, and more wine was produced in this particular spot than any place in the world. They had tens of thousands of acres of vineyard here. And Secondo Guasti had a 5,000 acre vineyard. So that was very large vineyard. It was basically a winemaking empire. As you can see here, there's lots of vineyard. Basically, this is the Day Creek Channel, sending the foothills up to the Cucamonga Peak in the background there. It's a really interesting place in winemaking history, as I've said.
And how does it relate to you?
Well, we're going to get there in a second, Marty. Because so you're asking yourself, what are we talking about Southern California for if we're over here in Pennsylvania? And I guess I should say at the outset that the philosophy here at Binah Winery is that grapevines, I have an idea that grapevines are trying to tell us something about the interconnectedness of our world, that there's stories to be told, and there's stories within stories, and basically through people extracting the juice from grapes and turning it into wine and then consuming it. The grapevines and these plants are trying to communicate something to us about our world. So that's why we consume wine. So every story kind of has a beginning, and this is kind of the beginning of the story. So there's a few reasons why we're starting here. The first being that this is a really interesting place, like I said, in winemaking history. We could talk about it for hours, but we're not going to obviously do that here. Maybe at some point in the future, we could do another thing. There's a really great book called Cucamonga Valley Wine by George M. Walker, if anybody's interested in history. I also wrote a paper early on in my winemaking studies, and I'd be happy to share that with anybody by email. Afterwards, if you write in the chat box, I will send that to you. Like I said, these were the biggest vineyards in the world at the time. Really interesting stuff. That's the first reason. The second reason being that I am actually a native to this place. So I was born here, and I lived there as a young boy. In this photograph, in a house that was built so many years later on kind of the right side of this picture here. The third reason being that my paternal great-grandfathers were Sicilian immigrants. They came here from Europe, and like so many of the Italians that came here to America, that part of Italian culture is wine, and they had a culture of making wine and enjoying it with family and friends. And so when they came to America, both my great-grandfathers were here in Pennsylvania, But they would basically have grapes shipped in from California, and they would get them here in Pennsylvania and then make the wine in their cellars. So here you can see, this was back in Cucamonga in California, but here you can see them packing up the grapes in the boxes that then they would ship by rail back to the East Coast, where people would pick them up. Many people were Italians, but obviously there were other ethnicities that did this as well. So, you know, as a kid, I didn't drink too much wine since it's an alcoholic beverage. So we'll have to fast forward, you know, 15 years here. And I should say that this is my second career. So I didn't start out in winemaking. I used to do type of engineering. I did architectural lighting design. Did that for about 5 years out of college. But I should also say that I'm Jewish. So in Judaism, a big thing in Judaism is that, you know, wine plays a pretty central role. So we use wine to sanctify our Sabbath, which is on Saturday from Friday night to Saturday night, and also our holidays. So basically we use a cup of wine and drink that to sanctify these days. You know, and if there's any questions going on here about anything I'm saying, then Marty, let me know and I'll address those as we go along.
We'll do.
As interactive as possible. So being that, you know, I had to make Kiddush and I was drinking wine on our Sabbath. I was buying a lot of wine in my young adulthood, and I found that I really liked wine and that it spoke to me and that I really had a palate for it, and I could detect these nuances, and I started spending more money on wine and drinking better wines over time. And I found I really had a passion for it. You know, and I could remember back to when, you know, my family made the wine and they told the stories about it. And I think I was with my wife. We were visiting a friend in Florida, and a friend was visiting her from Israel. His name was Tuvia, and he had a friend who had a small winery in Israel. And so he was talking to him on Skype one day, and I was sitting there and joining in the conversation. And then afterwards, after we got off the Skype, we were talking a little bit. And at the time, I was thinking about a career change. You know, I was thinking about doing something else besides the lighting. It wasn't, you know, I enjoyed doing it, but I was thinking about doing something else with my life. I felt compelled to do something else. And this Tuvia suggested and said, you know, you should think about making wine. I think you'd really enjoy doing this. You know, so the light bulb kind of went off in my head because I had been drinking wine. I really enjoyed it. And I kind of had this family history. So my wife and I were living down in the Washington, D.C. area at the time, you know, and she went to Whole Foods one time and they were selling, you know, wine grapes they were calling, you know, in sort of a clamshell. And she joked about getting that, but we were in apartments, so there wasn't really any room to make wine. But we actually moved back up to Pennsylvania that year. My wife is from Bucks County, and you know, I grew up, both of my parents are from Pennsylvania, from Wilkes-Barre, so I kind of grew up between Southern California and here on the East Coast as well. We had a lot of family in the area. We moved up to Pennsylvania to Allentown, and then we had a house in a basement. So now I've got the space to be able to make wine, and I had this idea that I wanted to do this. So I said, okay, let's do this, and got serious. So I think it was about a 1/4 ton of grapes I purchased through Keystone Homebrew Supply in Bethlehem when it was still there. You could get the fresh grapes in from Chile, from South America. And we got a bunch of friends over in my basement and we made some wine. So, you know, shortly before this, I was thinking, how am I going to do this? And my father and my grandfather had both been involved when they were younger with my great grandfathers. So they had been involved and saw firsthand the process. So I asked them, you know, how'd you guys make the wine? You know, so I got my bearings a little bit and basically figured out the basic process. And I remember as a kid, my grandfather had in his basement my old great grandfather's wood press that they used, the basket press, for the longest time. Unfortunately, he took that apart and threw it in the trash a couple of years before I came around asking, so how's that for timing? But he did have this small fruit press that you can see here, that basically 100 years old that they used to use. And so he gave me this, and we used this to make wine that first time in the spring of 2014 at home. And you can see the carboys. Those are about 6-gallon carboys in the background. This is probably a few years after we started making wine at home, but this is how we got started here. And as I said, I was already really serious about making wine, and I already had this idea that we were going to start a commercial winery here in Allentown. And so that was the idea. And so I later that year in 2014 enrolled in a 2-year program, certificate program for enology and viticulture. So enology is the science of winemaking, and viticulture is the science of growing grapes, having a vineyard. And that was through Hack, Harrisburg Area Community College. It's now, I believe the program's at Penn State Berks. Marty can correct me if he has more information.
I believe that's true.
Yeah, so it's actually surprising that there's no 4-year winemaking degree in Penn State. It's very interesting because Cornell has one and Virginia Tech does.
There's not anything in Pennsylvania right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Not even a 2-year.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, but there was this 2-year online program, which I was able to get into because there's a very famous program at UC Davis in California, but there was a wait list for that. You had to wait years to get on that. So I enrolled in this program through Hack here in Pennsylvania, and Marty Cook was actually in those courses with me. So that's how I came to know Marty Cook. So I was enrolled in that higher education program to learn winemaking while I was making wine at home. And through that 2-year program, we also had to get some real experience, some field work. So they hooked us up with a internship. We had to find a Pennsylvania winery and have an internship. So I got hooked up with Pinnacle Ridge Winery in Kutztown. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. It is one of the better known wineries. It's been around since the 90s in Pennsylvania.
I just drove by there today. They are open.
They are open today, yes. And we'll get to that in a second here. So this is what I saw. This was the late summer of 2015. So 2015, I went to Pinnacle Ridge. This was the harvest of 2015. This was the first day. It was late August, and this was the Chardonnay we were harvesting for their Blanc de Blanc sparkling wine. And that's actually Brad Knapp, the owner winemaker at Pinnacle Ridge. That's his legs in the background there. So I did that, and it was, kind of fun. And so I kind of had these parallel tracks going on now of making wine at home and also working at Pinnacle Ridge. And I would eventually go on to become their assistant winemaker. So this is where I, sort of cut my teeth in winemaking here at Pinnacle Ridge. So I was making a lot of wines between there and at home over, a very short period of time. So here, I guess this was take your kid to work day one summer. So that's my oldest son, Lev. I now have 3 little boys who are my sons, and hopefully they'll grow up soon enough and help me with some of this work, because it's a little bit too much work for me to be doing all this myself. Winemaking is a very labor-intensive endeavor, as we're about to see here. So this was one summer at Pinnacle Ridge. So now fast forward a little bit. This was the harvest of 2018, so a couple years ago. This was actually the last harvest that we did at home before we went commercial and started Binah Winery. So this is our friend, Moshe was his name, and he was actually a student at Muhlenberg College in Allentown. And he was coming over after his classes and was really interested in the wine and learning about it. So he's loading up the press with Viognier grapes that we had gotten from a local vineyard. And here's me pressing. And, thinking back on this, because I was at Pinnacle Ridge during the day, that was my day job. And then coming home at night and, trying to make wine all night long, and then getting up early in the morning and go back to Pinnacle Ridge. Harvest is the really busy time of year at the winery. So looking back, it was like, this was so much work, but now it's like we were just playing games back then with the scale that we were at. We were only making 100 gallons of wine. So I can remember back to 2017. I It was crazy. I mean, I was working, 12 hours at Pinnacle Ridge, and then coming home and spending another 6 to 7, 8 hours at night making wines.
You were younger.
I was a little bit younger. I was a little bit younger. That was a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, it's good to get into winemaking when you're young, for sure. A lot of people do this as a second career after they've retired in their 50s or 60s, and by then it becomes a lot harder. So I've seen my dream a little bit earlier.
By the way,
in 2017, for example, I was making some 20 some wines over at Pinnacle Ridge. I was basically making their wine over there. I would consult with Brad and he would kind of guide things, but I was the hands-on, and then coming home and making 20 some wines at home that year. To me, I mean, you'd ask, I mean, how do you learn how to make wine? Well, we were in those courses and we were learning how to make wine through the textbooks, but you can read a textbook, but you're not going to know how to make good wine just by reading the textbook. The science is in there. But for me, what I've learned through this process is that it's trial and error. The first wine we made back in 2014, it was barely drinkable. And some of the people on this Zoom will know because they drank that wine, and, you could barely get it down. It had reduced sulfur odors and totally out of balance. But learn the mistakes very fast and learn, because there's a very fine line between making, not very good wine and really great wine, in terms of the balance and how you make the wine. It's a very fine line, and that's stuff you can really only learn through hands-on experience and just making the mistakes. But you have to make the mistakes and learn why it was a mistake. So that's how I was able to come so far so fast, and just that idea in my head that we want to start a winery here, and just that passion of I'm trying to get to that day when it's a reality. And that's what kept me pushing through all these years, all these experiences. So this was actually 4 or 5 months before I took the nosedive, because I was at Pinnacle Ridge and I knew I wanted to start this winery, but things held me back. How are we going to find the money? Do I have enough experience yet? Is the timing right? Have we planned it out enough? And then one year it just became obvious that it was time to do this. So 4 or 5 months after this, I left Pinnacle Ridge in the spring of 2019, and there was an opportunity. So the grapes we had got here that we were pressing came from a vineyard in Eastern. It's somebody's property that they had, 5 acres they had on their property, and they had been growing grapes for decades, and they were selling them to home winemakers. Well, the man who planted this vineyard, Jack Fulton, he got older and didn't really want to do that anymore. So they were looking for someone to come in and, lease the place and take it over. So there was this opportunity, and it seemed like the right thing to do at the right time. And it gave us a path of opportunity to make this a reality. So I left Pinnacle Ridge, quit that job. And now I find myself here in February 2019, standing in this snow-covered vineyard. That's now my responsibility, and without a job, and and standing here. And now I have about 6 weeks before bud break, and I have to get this 5-acre vineyard pruned. So I'd come out, it was freezing cold, and I could barely stand out there to be out there for more than a few hours. It was really cold. I'm staring up at this hill of vines, thousands of vines that need to be pruned, and it hadn't been maintained very well the year before, actually. So there was a lot of work to do in some of these places. But I had this idea that this is it. We're starting the winery now, and I just have to push through this. And so it kept going. Here's me pruning. It was getting a little bit warmer as we went March into April. But it was really a rush against the clock to get this vineyard pruned. So I guess my dad showed up at the end and helped me finish up the last little bit. So my dad flew back from California and spent a week with me and helped me finish this vineyard.
Notice he showed up after the snow left.
That's right. He wasn't out there when it was 25 degrees. I think we're in short sleeve shirts at this point in late April. But you can see we got it done just in the nick of time. And I took a few days off to take a break, because we went through this 5-acre vineyard, mostly myself. help from family and friends along the way. We got it done, took a few days off, and then I came back and this was happening. So this is bud break. This is when the dormant pines send out new shoots for the year. And so they were very small at first and very cute. And very quickly they turned into this, and you can start to see the clusters forming. I mean, this is within a week, 10 days after the bud break.
And then the work started to magnify.
That's right. So that feeling of being totally in over my head back when I was pruning now is really becoming a sense of panic because I've never taken care of a vineyard before. You know, I had experience at Pinnacle Ridge. Now I'm totally responsible for this vineyard myself. And so we're in Pennsylvania here. It's a very humid climate, and we have a lot of disease pressure because of that humidity from fungal disease, from things like powdery mildew, and downy mildew, and black rot, which will attack these young shoots. And if you don't keep up on it, you could lose your crop very quickly. So there was all this pressure to not only take care of the vineyard, I'm relying on this crop to make our first vintage of wine to start Binah Winery. So there's a lot of pressure, and you have to spray the vineyard basically weekly with fungicides to keep those fungal diseases at bay. So
for those of you who may not be familiar with this, I just want to interject and say 5 acres of vineyard is a lot of work for one man, a lot of work.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I was really pushing the limit of what one person, the truth of the matter is I couldn't keep up with it. So I did what I had to do to get this crop, and we got a crop out of it. But it was a lot of work, and it was Geneva double curtain. So when you go down the rows, you can see. So this was May vineyard. Shoots are getting longer. It's Geneva double curtain. So for every row of trunks you have going down this vineyard, the canopy is split into 2 cordons, basically. So for every row, it's twice. In a normal vineyard, you only have 1 row. So it's really like a 7 or 8 acre vineyard that I was taking care of. And it was a humbling experience. You know, it's farming basically, and you're out here in the elements, in the weather, and this was a sunny day. So I'm going out to work, and this is what I would see a lot of days. But there were days when there was torrential downpours and thunderstorms, and those days weren't as fun as these sunny days. But whatever, this is what we were doing. And so I was out here, and I got some help from friends, but it was, 85% me. I had to cut the grass, had to do the sprays. And this vineyard is actually in a very steep valley. It's like a quarter mile from the Delaware River. It's almost in New Jersey, in the very eastern end of the Lehigh Valley. And it's interesting because it was planted on a very steep north-facing slope. So as sunny as this looks, you actually didn't have much morning sun. So I did some things. So here's me cutting the grass in the tractor. I had to do this twice a week and get out with the sprayer and do that. Shoot thinning, cluster thinning, and all that good stuff that you have to do to maintain a vineyard. So this was summer, looking up. This is actually looking south. So you have these trees up on the hill there, and so you don't get the morning sun. So and this site actually I knew to have a very vigorous canopy. It had a lot of leaves, which I thought was affecting the wine quality. So one of the approaches I took, you can see here, there's a lot of native vegetation, basically weeds that I let grow right under the vine canopy itself, right under the trunks. And it's sort of an unconventional thing, but a lot of people do it. And the reason I did this was it sucks up the extra rainwater. It makes the vine struggle a little bit more. You get less leaves in the canopy. And also, I did a lot of work to try to really expose the fruit at the top of the canopy in this Geneva double curtain, because the flavors in the wines, come from that skin exposure to the sun. That's where a lot of the flavor comes from. So I did these kind of unconventional methods in this vineyard to see if we could try to improve the quality of the crop. So this was summer. This is my wife, Sarah, and I. So she came out to help a little bit. And, the kids came out, and we had family and friends helping us. So you can really see here where we were letting the weeds really grow up in here. And, I think it was a great success what the crop that we got out of here was. So it was keep pushing through the summer and being that sense of being totally overwhelmed, knowing that harvest is coming very quick and the growing season happens very quickly. And then it was time to harvest. So this was the first week of September, and this is our friend Ben from Allentown who came out to help. So we had more help from family and friends to get this harvest in. So here, this is it. This finally becoming a reality. This was our first commercial harvest happening, and here we're hauling in the grapes. So we were making sparkling rosé from red grapes that day. That was the first thing that we picked. You kind of pick underripe the grapes to try to make a sparkling wine. It's higher acid and more of a neutral base wine. Makes a better sparkling wine.
What do you estimate your harvest that season to be in terms of pounds or tonnage?
Oh, so 2019, we brought about 16 or 17 tons out of that vineyard.
Wow.
It was about 2,500 gallons of wine, which results in or leads to slightly less than 1,000 cases of wine, basically. So there's about 2.5 gallons of wine in a case, 9 liters. You can do the math. So it was fairly sizable harvest that we're bringing in here. And this was one of the presses they had. So this was the first home of Binah Winery. So this is at the same place on these people's property where the vineyard was, and they had this small area back in a barn behind their house where they had this basket press and a slightly larger press behind us there. So here I am loading up, and we did a whole cluster of pressing for the sparkling wine to try to get that very pure virgin juice out of it. So that's the first day of the harvest, and it's now here. It's another big milestone we've crossed, and we're now finally making the wine. So it's kind of a relief at the same time, and now all this pressure bringing the harvest in, but now we're finally making the wine. We've had this vision for the past 5 years that we're going to do this. So I think at this point we're gonna start doing the tasting. We're going to start with the Chardonnay. So if you have your Chardonnay, whoever's tasting, this one right here. Let's see if you can see the bottle. Camera might not see the bottle. Doesn't like to see it. It's the white label one. It says Chardonnay on it. And so I'm showing here, this is a picture of one of the clusters of Chardonnay that went into making this wine. So you can see here that the sun exposure and the color in the skins, the vineyard. And this is another shot of those actual grapes that went into making this wine that you're drinking right now. There's a cluster of it. So I think at this point, I've been talking a lot. Let's open it up to, if there's any questions, let's do those. And then, I don't want to tell anybody what they should be tasting in the wine, because obviously it's a subjective thing and everyone tastes something slightly different. I can talk in general about the winemaking style. So this is an unoaked Chardonnay, aged in stainless steel. Most Chardonnays that you get in the traditional style, they're oak. They've gone through malolactic fermentation, but this one hasn't. It's more like a style of a Chablis. It's more of a crisp, leaner style of Chardonnay. Fermentation, so it's more of a light-bodied, fruity style. I think when we harvest, this came in at 18 bricks, but we chaptalized up to 22. So here on the East Coast, in many parts of Europe, the grapes can come in with less sugar than you need to convert to the alcohol percentage you're getting to. So we have to add sugar basically to boost up the sugar content of the grapes to get us up to that 12.5% alcohol content that we have in this wine.
So the acid was a little higher in these grapes when you picked them?
Yeah, in general, the acids are higher. So the pH I have here was 3.44 at harvest, 3.44, which is actually getting up there for a white grape. So usually for a white grape, if it gets up to 3.44 or 3.4, 3.5, it's time to pick the white grape. So you don't want it to get too high because you can get a flabby wine.
This is a very nice crisp wine, though. Very clean. You there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, we're not getting any comments. I had an earlier comment. Well,
We have to this is an interactive thing. We have to comment. There has to, somebody has to say something. And John might
Okay,
about
Cindy Shingler, who, by the way, is having her dinner, and she described it earlier as having sushi with her Chardonnay, and then she has a marinated octopus salad with her Chardonnay as well. And
Okay.
she would like to have an explanation of what non-mavushal means.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I haven't mentioned it up to this point. So Binah Winery is the first and only certified kosher winery in Pennsylvania, and it's one of only a few on the East Coast. Small premium boutique wineries. So basically, I'll give a brief explanation of what kosher wine is and how it's different from non-kosher wine. The first being ingredients. So in kosher, there's things that certain animals that we can't have, and certain animal byproducts that we can't have that are kosher sensitive. So, for example, we can't use certain fining agents in kosher winemaking, like gelatin, isinglass from fish bladders. And the other big thing about kosher wine is that because of the significance that it has in Jewish ritual, we want to make sure that the wine has never, in its winemaking process, has never been basically used for any other religious or spiritual purpose. So the requirement is that we have observant Jewish people who make the wine, basically. So through that, we're able to ensure that we know it's literally just wine being made and nothing else has been done with it. So in terms of mavushal or non-mavushal, so the juice is basically non-mavushal after you crush the grapes and remove the juice from the grapes or press them off. Now it's considered wine in Jewish law, and only observant Jews can handle it until you put a cork in the bottle, basically, or even when you open the cork and it's poured. So one way to get around that is mavushal, which literally means cooking. So basically, cooking wine it renders it unfit for ritual purpose in any religious setting or any of the pagan societies that they had in ancient times. So if you cook the wine, basically now anybody can handle it. My wines are non-mavushal, meaning they haven't been cooked, and they used to cook them, but in modern day usage, it basically means they're flash pasteurized. So they'll heat up the wine to, let's say, 180 degrees for a few seconds, cool it down very quickly, and that makes a wine mavushal nowadays. But my wines are not mavushal. Some people think it's a more high quality product. There's actually a lot of evidence that if you do the flash pasteurization early on in the process for juice, it can actually make the aromas of the wine much more apparent. So there's pros and cons to both of them. So hopefully that answers the question.
I have a couple of comments here. Allison says that she normally does not care for a Chardonnay, but this is very good. And Bernie says that it's very enjoyable. And this is from a 66-year-old who is still trying to develop some degree of palate. That's what he says. And then Cindy, after your explanation of mavushal, she said, thank you for the explanation. And Wilson says that he feels that the Chardonnay is very much like a Riesling, perhaps because of the crispness is what he might be thinking of.
Yeah. Yes. So the leaner style here, unoaked, it's not your typical Chardonnay. So people who say they don't like Chardonnay might find this wine enjoyable because they may have never had a Chardonnay like this before. It's more rare to find it in a naked or an unoaked style. There were also other varieties blended into this. It's technically still a Chardonnay varietal, though it's more than 75% Chardonnay. But there were other varieties in the vineyard, and I believe, if I can look here, yes. So there's another grape variety called Kerner, which is a German variety, and it's very much like Riesling. So I did have a small amount of Kerner that was blended into this. So you may be getting some of the characteristics from that grape coming through.
Before we leave the topic of this Chardonnay, we should mention the fact that garnered a silver medal in the Finger Lakes wine competitions, which is an international wine competition. And that was just this past summer, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. So if we'll move on to the Stella. That's the blue label you have.
We have a couple other comments here. Let me see. Stephen White asks, you might, or suggests, you might like to share which kosher supervising authority you have been working with. And
yeah. Is there more to the question?
There's another question. Bernie says, just starting on white wines, what do you think about orange wines? I have tasted, well, that's a whole nother topic for another show.
Yeah, we're not going to go down that hole.
Yeah, the Eastern Europeans have popularized orange wines, and 95% of those, interestingly enough, are shipped to Japan.
Yeah. I can say one thing about orange wine, though. I've known people who have tried it here on the East Coast. I wouldn't recommend it on the East Coast. So basically, orange wines are white wines that are fermented on the skins, much like a red wine. So they're much more tannic. They're much more pigmented. They're actually orange colored.
So you're saying that they tried them on the East Coast, meaning they tried to make them on the East Coast?
I know people who have tried it. They weren't successful, and I can tell you why. Because our grapes we're a cool climate. Our grapes do not ripen to the extent that they do in hot climates. So the tannins are immature. They tend to be greener. And when you do skin extraction on the grapes during fermentation, you get all that green tannin out of there. And so you get these more astringent wines. It's very popular here amongst Pennsylvania wineries. We actually do hyperoxidation. So we do not add sulfur dioxide, which is an antimicrobial and antioxidative additive that we add to the wines to preserve them. And so if you don't add those, then the oxygen is uptaken by the juice and interacts with these phenolic tannic, which are molecular structures that are responsible for the color and that kind of astringent, dry feeling in your mouth. Basically, the oxygen reacts with those, and those things drop out at the beginning of winemaking. So we lose a lot of the astringency from these green, underdeveloped tannins that we have on the East Coast. In a warmer climate, they're more success with it.
Or not Bernie. Cindy asks if your wines are available in the Pennsylvania wine and spirit stores or just by ordering through your website. I think currently it's just through your website, although March, April timeframe of 2021, isn't there an expectation that you'll have some of your wines in some of the?
Yeah, I think there's a possibility. I'm in ongoing working with the LCB, the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, to become a supplier for their fine wine and good spirit stores. So if that all goes through and it becomes official, then hopefully we'll be on the shelves of the fine wine and good spirit stores in 2021. So you can buy the wines through our website, binahwinery.com/shop. Shipping to almost 40 states that I have listed on there. You can also get curbside pickup right here at the winery in Allentown, south side of Allentown. Local delivery here within the west end of Allentown.
Jerry Bennick congratulates you on the silver award. Alan Gold asks, how did you come to the name of Binah?
Oh yeah, so that's a good point to bring up. So actually, when we first started making wine in our basement, I called it Bisnoni because that means an Italian great-grandfather. So it's sort of a nod to the family tradition. We moved away from that. So Binah is actually a Hebrew word, and it translates to various things like understanding, intuition, perception. And it has a lot of mystical connotations in Judaism. And we chose this because for me, wine and winemaking, like I said, it speaks to the interconnectedness of things in our world. And when we drink wine, obviously it has alcohol in it. So, it alters your state of consciousness. And, for a lot of people, it opens their mind up to creativity and creative thinking and socializing with people and seeing things in a different way than you have, and just experience of the flavors and the aromas in the wine. does things to your mind and brings up thoughts and memories and things like that. So, you know, that's kind of the idea behind Binah. It's sort of this mystical outlook of the world and that sort of thing.
Stephen White's still looking for an answer to who it is with
Oh.
we're working.
Right. So we're under the, if you turn on the back label, you'll see that the OUP and the LVKC. So the OU is probably the most famous kosher supervising agency in the world. That's the Orthodox Union. If you go to the grocery store, you'll find them on at least half the products in the grocery store.
Jerry, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other one is the LVKC, so that's the local Lehigh Valley Kashrut Commission.
Jerry Bennett asks, so what is the message in Hebrew on the cork?
Oh, it says kosher lepesach lo mavushal. So basically it's saying kosher for Passover. So it can be used during Passover as well. And it's saying it's not mavushal.
And you had told me, by the way, didn't you say Binah stands for understanding?
Yeah, it translates to things like understanding, intuition, perception, things like that.
Okay. And Karen Schneider says it would be great to get your wines in the fine wine and good spirits stores by Passover, since your wines are kosher for Passover. And I did have.
We're working on it. I don't have control over those decisions, so I can only do so much.
I did have a brief exchange with the buyer downtown at the central office of the PLCB, and he said that it was his hope that he would have these in the stores by the March-April timeframe for Passover.
Yes. So, are there any more questions? Should we do the Stella now?
Let's do the Stella.
Yeah. So the Stella. So this is our blue label. So we have two tiers of wines. The blue label and the upper tier, our white label stuff, are more of a limited production, and the vinifera. So the Stella, which sort of has a cult following, it's very popular. It's a dry white wine blend, hybrid grapes. There's Seyval Blanc, there's Chardonnay, which you can see in the picture here. Those are a couple clusters of Chardonnay. And there's also Vignoles in it. And I designed Stella as sort of a kind of a blending place, because there's variation from vintage to vintage, and depending where you get the grapes, that I could make this, you know, Stella wine from year to year, and it would kind of be the same wine. And depending on what grapes I could get, I could blend them together to make this wine from year to year. It's lightly oaked, French oak. It did go through partial malolactic, so there might be a little bit of butteriness in there. You know, it has a lot of tropical fruit flavors from the vignoles, and also you can see in this picture here of the Chardonnay. So as I talked before about the sun exposure that I was doing, so these clusters you can see had a lot of sun exposure, so they're very darkly copper colored, and I think that's responsible for a lot of the very tropical flavors that you're tasting in this wine. You know, so maybe people are drawing some comparisons between this and the Chardonnay that we just tasted. So the Stella is meant to be more of your generic oaked Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc type of wine. You know, it's a mass appeal wine to dry white wine drinkers.
I have a comment from Stephen White. He's asking, are these wines considered sulfur free? I believe he means sulfite free. Do you want to take that one?
No, they are not sulfite free.
I mean, you know, such as it is.
Honestly, very few wines commercially made are sulfite free.
Well, sulfite's a naturally occurring agent of fermentation.
That's correct. When yeast ferment sugar and alcohol, they do produce about 10 ppm of sulfur dioxide themselves. So you never really truly have a totally sulfite free wine. And sulfur dioxide is a very important additive. It's added in very minute quantities. There's barely any in the wine, but it has very potent antimicrobial and antioxidative properties, meaning that it protects the wine against bacteria that could be in the wine that could spoil it, as well against oxygen, because oxygen, if you have too much, can destroy a wine. So we add a little bit to preserve the freshness of the wine and ensure that it ages well, and that when you drink that wine in the glass, the flavors that were in the juice are still now in this wine. You there's a lot of talk about whether sulfites are good for your health or not, and whether they cause headaches and various things. But the reality is that, like in Stella, there was 30 ppm, 35 ppm at bottling maybe, which is a very small amount. And if you eat dried fruit, there's well over 2,000, 3,000 ppm. So it's a much higher level of sulfite in dried fruit. Salad bars back in the 80s, they were just dumping this stuff all over the lettuce basically to preserve it. So,
Beth asks, where are the grapes from now? Where do you source them from?
okay, so yeah, we're going to get to that a little bit more. I didn't renew the lease on this vineyard because going forward, I had to start a winery. I couldn't donate my labor to this endeavor anymore. So I'd have to hire someone. I'd have to try to manage a vineyard remotely. And it was too much work to even take care of the vineyard myself. So here I am over here trying to start a winery and try to manage a vineyard remotely. It was too much to have your hands in. So now I just buy the grapes from the East Coast region. This year I bought from different states. I bought from New York, from Long Island, New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania, as well as locally sourced here in the Lehigh Valley as well.
Wilson asks what you would pair the Stella with, and I've got a message here from Cindy saying, I'm having it with soft-shelled crab sushi.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah. So crab, people have described crab as being a very good pairing with this. It has a tangy, almost tingly finish to it, which goes really well with that.
It would go great.
Seafood, fish goes very well. Lean meats, pasta, white pasta with olive oil, things like that would go very well. Greens, herbs, things of those nature.
So you ready to switch to red?
Yeah, let's go to the red. Shamerson is our red.
And
It's the only red I have available for sale at the moment. It takes a little bit longer to get red wines to market because of their longer aging process. It takes longer for their flavors to develop to get them into the bottle. And then once in the bottle, it takes more time because the wines improve over time. So red wines take a little bit longer to get to be ready to drink than the white wines. So you can see when you go to our site that we have a lot of white wines at the moment, rosé, and we only have this one red. So Shamerson is actually a French-American hybrid grape, and it originated in France in the Loire Valley, and they still use it over there to make table wines. They're not allowed to use it by the AOC for varietal wines, but they make table wines. So if you go to the grocery store in France, you can pick up a jug of Shamerson. It's a light-bodied red. It has low tannins, frequently immature tannins. So you'll find it much more quaffable, or shall we say easier to drink than a lot of your really full-bodied tannic reds that come from warm and hot climates. You still get the red fruit, the red tree fruit flavors, and there's very herbaceous element to Shamerson that people describe, almost like tobacco or earthy, gravel, mushroomy kind of flavors in there. It went through malolactic fermentation. It's bone dry. It was aged with French and American oak.
By the way, we should mention, in backtracking a little bit, and your wife is prompting us here, she says Stella is also an award winner. It won silver at the Finger Lakes international competition, did it not?
That's correct. Thank you, Sarah.
And the Shamerson, you just haven't had a chance to enter it in a competition yet, right?
That's correct. So it was bottled in August, which was after I haven't had an opportunity, but it has been entered into the 2021 PA Farm Show and should be judged here this month. And we should be getting results of that back within a month here. I will also enter that in Finger Lakes next year, assuming they have it COVID related. It will be entered in the Los Angeles International Wine Competition as well.
We're getting a question from Z, who's asking what percent alcohol by volume is the red. And Beth, with regard to the red, says, how does it have tobacco hints? And Karen Schneider says she's picking up cherry notes in the red.
Yes.
And Beth, going back to Beth, she says, I don't like red, but wow, this is good.
Okay, so the alcohol is 13%. That's on the back label of the wine as well. And so you're looking at a picture here of me driving through the Chamberson block, and this was at the bottom of the hill. And the Chamberson were the ripest grapes that we got out of this vineyard in 2019. So this block actually got up to 23 bricks, which is 13% alcohol. So very ripe. You can see the sun exposure here. We green cluster thin this, so we cut out the underripe clusters to really develop the flavors in the remaining clusters. You know, we cluster thin, we thinned out the crop, and yeah, I'm really happy with this wine. So as far as tobacco notes, no, we're not adding tobacco to the wine. It's natural characteristic of the wine. So like when we describe wine as having flavors, cherry, strawberry, you know, stone fruit, peaches, things like that. We're not adding fruit juice to the wine. It's just such that the characteristics of the grapes themselves have molecular structure, and a lot of these molecules are the same as you find in these other fruits. So they carry over, and so you taste things or you smell things that smell like these fruits, but that doesn't mean that we're adding. It's all 100% grape juice here.
Yeah, I think I read someplace where there were like 10,000 chemical compounds you could pick up that the human nose could discern.
Right, and it's very complex, and it's not just from the grapes; it's from the winemaking. So you talk about bouquet, that's the smells that you get, the aromas that you get from winemaking. So malolactic fermentation adds a butteriness. So malolactic fermentation is when the malic acid in the grapes are converted by malolactic bacteria to lactic acid, which is the same acid that's found in milk. So it's a softer acid on the palate. You also get, if you do oak aging, you'll get the aromas from the oak as well. You get vanilla, nutmeg, cloves, spices, things like that as well. So just the grapes themselves and where they were grown and the vintage that they were grown in and what the weather was and all this stuff that you do in the cellar during the winemaking process all goes into the pot to make a very unique wine. And that harkens back to what I said all along. The kind of philosophy is that these grapevines and winemaking is trying to tell us a story. So these grapes were out here, they absorbed the world in 2019 in this very specific place. And now here we are opening up in 2020, almost going into 2021. And we're experiencing what these grapes did. And all this work that we did is in this glass. So it's a very, very profound thing, I think, you know, and these wines I've made to, you know, age for quite some time. So we'll be drinking these for years to come.
Beth, by the way, comments that she thinks this red wine should win a gold medal. And
I hope so. Double gold.
Wilson comments that Chamberson has really become a great red. Seems to be great to dip on, as well as with a pasta dish.
Right.
Terrific to have quality kosher wines produced not far from my home in Baltimore, Maryland. That's coming from Bernie.
Yeah. So, and I should also note that we will have from the 2020 vintage Maryland appellation wines. So I did get a number of grapes from Maryland this year. So there will be Maryland label wines coming out here soon.
We have a message from Bob who says he picks up floral taste in Stella. Very interesting. Which, geez, I was thinking that might be from the Viognier. And then Beth said it would be delicious to cook in your with. I'm assuming she means the Chamberson in your spaghetti sauce. Spaghetti sauce.
Yeah. My grandmother always would add the red wine to her tomato sauce. And she said that that's what made it so great.
All right. So. Karen Schneider again, light and crisp red, easy drinking for a summer afternoon. Is it summer out there?
Where?
I don't know. She must be.
Where are they? Are they in the southern hemisphere?
So
So, we'll keep tasting here and keep your questions going in the comments. I'm going to keep going through the pictures here as we taste and talk. So this picture is my in-laws, my father-in-law and mother-in-law. As I said, we got family and friends to come out, and so they were out there helping with the Chamberson harvest. This is one of the last days of harvest that we had. They're displaying their lugs of grapes that they picked.
Michael Alexander asks, were your Italian relatives Jewish?
No, not as far as we know.
And Karen Snyder laughs and says, wishful thinking, I'm in Harrisburg.
So this was hauling the grapes. So we bring them in and send them down the chute and throw them into the destemmer crusher here. And then they would get pumped into the room where they would ferment. So this is Bob, who I believe is on the Zoom right now. This is one of our kosher supervisors who came and would also get hands-on and help with the process. So this was over here at the vineyard. This was our first home. This is Ronnie, one of our other kosher supervisors, who also gets hands-on. So you can see he's bundled up. This was in November, so this was after the reds fermented, because the difference between white wine and red wine is that with white wine, we press the juice off the grapes immediately and then ferment the clear juice. Whereas with red, we ferment on the skins, and that's where the color in red wine comes from, is from the skins, except for Chamberson, which is a Teinturier, which actually has red juice. So that's a neat little tidbit facto there.
You want to sort of tell them Teinturier, explain that a little?
Teinturier, what?
You want to explain that a little for the?
Yeah, so there's a few red grapes. Alicante Boucher is another one. There's a few of them. So usually for a red grape, if you cut it open, it's white inside. So for like Cabernet Franc, I can actually press off Cabernet Franc and make a white wine from Cabernet Franc. And actually, I remember one time Bob brought one of these to a dinner we were at. It was a white Cabernet Franc we had, and it was very interesting. But for these Teinturier grapes, when you cut them open, it's red juice that comes out. I cannot make a white wine. So that's why it's so vibrantly colored in the glass. And our rosé, for example, you'll see it's much darker than the rosé you would get from Provence in France. And that has to do with the Chamberson. It's so darkly pigmented that when you press off these grapes, the press run that comes off the press looks like red wine. So it's a very kind of interesting thing.
Yeah, the Teinturier grapes, there are a couple that are grown in the Finger Lakes by Dr. Frank. Separavi's one. I think he grows another one called Vitis amurensis. And they're just inky jet black wines, just very, very tannic wines.
Yeah, so I mean, Chamberson is a very important grape here in Pennsylvania. It's widely grown on the East Coast. Probably because it's a hybrid grape and it does very well. It's very cold hardy in our winters. It's very disease resistant. And it's also great for blending. So, I add a little Chamberson in a lot of my red wines just to boost that color. Because I said we're in a cool climate and our grapes tend to skew towards the underripe side of the spectrum as opposed to a very hot climate. So you can blend a little Chamberson in and get some color to your red wines. I also experimented. So you'll notice that the Chamberson is, like I said, very light bodied, very low in tannin. And I was doing a little experimentation and blending a little of my Cabernet Franc into it a few weeks ago. And I really like the way it is. So I might experiment with that in 2020 to add some of the Cabernet Franc, which tends to be a much more tannic variety. To try to get a better balance in these wines going forward.
I have a couple comments here. Let me see real quick. Lauren Levin Dano says that one of the photos you showed was of her father.
That's right. That's Bob.
And then
this is Bob, her father.
and then Bernie comments that he was amazed at how wonderfully sweet the Sauvignon Blanc grape juice was that he tasted at Dalton Winery in Israel. And Bob Harris is commenting that the Chamberson is great with dark chocolate.
Oh yeah. So actually, yeah, a lot of wineries really promote that around here. The pairing of Chamberson with chocolate. It's very. There's almost like a chocolate note that you get in Chamberson. Chamberson is a very, it's. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it because I like to get that fuller bodied in a dry red that Chamberson doesn't tend to have. But it's really complex in the spectrum of flavors that you get from this grape, from these really bright red fruit notes all the way to these herbaceous, gravel, tobacco flavors, and like this really heavy mushroom element. There's really a wide range of spectrum of flavors in Chamberson.
Beth is eating her cheddar cranberry cheese with her Chamberson.
Yeah,
and,
sounds good.
Stephen White says it sounds like a Chamberson would be a nice, not too heavy choice for having a red at the Seder.
Oh yeah, for sure. That'd be very good for the Arba, for the 4 cups that we drink at the Seder. It's likened to sort of a Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir tends to be a lighter, low tannin wine, but it's much more darker color than Pinot Noir for sure. It's somewhere kind of between a Pinot Noir and a Merlot, I would say. But it's made in a variety of styles. It's a very versatile grape, so you can get these very steely, tart rosés with strawberry and berry flavors, but it can also be oak aged and be very peppery and boisterous at the same time as well. And in the full spectrum, semi-sweet, they make it. So a lot of the wineries in Pennsylvania have many a variation on Chamberson. It's very popular around this area. And I should note, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only kosher Chamberson in the world. So I challenge someone to prove me wrong.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it holds up too, because Chamberson can be aged for a very long time.
Oh yeah, I've seen people 10 years or more pull them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll go through the pictures here more, and we'll keep the conversation going. So this is Ronnie loading up the press. I think this was probably Cabernet Franc that we were pressing in November, so it was getting colder, and we were doing this.
By the way, Beth suggests that you start early with taking orders for Passover, because the red, i.e. the Chamberson, will be in great demand.
Well, I'm taking orders starting right now. Get your order in today.
Spoken like a true businessman. And Jerry comments, he says, okay, whoever said dark chocolate, I just tried Chamberson with Ghirardelli 92% cocoa, and wow.
Yeah. Yes. So here's loading up the bigger press with our red grapes. It was kind of the end of harvest of 2019. So we were over here, we were leasing this vineyard, and there was enough. I was working out of 300 square feet of space that we had at this place, which was enough room to have my tanks in these rooms and make the wine and ferment them and finish harvest. And there was barely room to even walk in these rooms. So there was no room to bottle. There was no room for case storage. We couldn't sell out of this place. So we knew that there was going to be a second home for Binah Winery somewhere. We had to go somewhere else beyond this. So I set out after harvest to look for a space in the Lehigh Valley. And I knew that I wanted Binah Winery to be an urban winery. So sort of this idea, I'd done a lot of research on it, that people had a lot of success, basically getting industrial space. You bring the grapes in and you make the wine in industrial space, you rent space. So your barriers to entry into the wine industry, which usually the saying is, you take a large fortune, you invest it, you start a winery, and then you make a small fortune, So, the traditional model is you go out in the country, you get land, you spend millions of dollars building a building, you plant a vineyard, you work at it for 5 years, then you make the wine, then it's another 5 years before you can even drink the wine. And, 10 years later and all this money later, hopefully you can, sell some wine. But with the urban model, you rent space. So it's much less capital intensive upfront. So the barriers to entry are much lower. So I knew that I wanted to do this. So I set out about finding a small industrial type of warehouse space in the Lehigh Valley. And I thought this should be a piece of cake because there was so much manufacturing and industry here a few decades ago that was all shuttered. There should be spaces all over the place. But the reality was there wasn't. And I had a very difficult time, but we had some connections and we knew some people. And so this space came available at the Bridgeworks Enterprise Center on the south side of Allentown. And the owner is Allentown Economic Development Corporation. And it was the right size that I needed. And it was very close to home. So I enjoy this shorter commute than I had at the vineyard. And so this was an old Mack Trucks factory, actually. They used to make Mack Trucks factory or Mack Trucks in here. And the building's, 100 years old, even more than that. And basically after the Mack Trucks left, AEDC took it over and they converted it into a small business manufacturing incubator. So they divided the factory up into smaller spaces that they would then rent out. So they had a space available. And this is the space, and here they're working on it and getting ready for us to move in. So this was a year ago, basically. And here's another shot of it. So this is where Binah Winery is now. We moved into this space, and so we found our second home. And last February, so February of 2020, so this year, we rented a Penske truck and we spent a few days, we put tanks on the truck over in Easton and we pump the wine onto the truck and then we drive a half an hour over to Allentown and drop the wine off in our new space. That's how we got it over here. And here you can see that was the 6 gallons of Pinot Noir that we had riding shotgun. So they only had half a row of Pinot Noir in this vineyard. So that's as much as there's 3 cases of it from 2019. So stay tuned, it's coming. So that's what we made the move, February, March, over to our new space here. And unbeknownst to us that COVID-19 would hit a few weeks later, and that was not in the business plan. And COVID actually hit the same week that we started basically selling wine. So
speaking about your business plan, Kevin, Bernie Kozlowski would like to know if there is a visitor center, which I'm sure he means tasting room, in your plan for the future. And also Karen Schneider asks, do you give tours?
So yes, yeah, sure. You can come by for a tour. I do sales out of the winery here at the winery facility location, 905 Harrison Street in Allentown. So drop by any time. I'm straightening up and cleaning up after the busy harvest season right now. So it'll be good to have tours in here again. I don't have a tasting room currently for various reasons. One of them being I'm not open on Saturday, and that's usually the busiest day for that kind of thing. There's also a trend that people are not visiting tasting rooms as much as they have in the past. And there's other reasons. It's basically me running this winery right now, so it's a lot of stuff for me to do. But it actually turned out to be a blessing because COVID hit and everybody's tasting rooms have been, shuttered or at reduced capacity. So instead of pouring a lot of resources into that up front, we've been able to focus on other things. So, I've thought in the future about possibly having a tasting room. Obviously we're renting this space now, and it's, in the future we may be in another facility that is ours, and there may be a tasting room. But I also would like to do, so we're doing this virtual wine tasting here today because of COVID. But the idea is that we would do, more private tasting. So if you'd like to have a tasting with me, I can certainly come out, and we can arrange for something after this COVID is over. And I'd love to meet people in person and drink through some wines and have this kind of conversation in person instead of over Zoom.
So to jump back to the Chamberson real quick, Lynn and Bill suggested if you keep some Chamberson 4 to 5 years, it starts to take on a Zinfandel characteristic. And,
yeah, sure.
And then let me see, Wilson had to jump off of the connection here, but he said, I will be more involved going forward. And let me see, Michael.
What is that? What does that mean?
I guess
Tasting or?
he's going to buy and buy your wines and
Okay, great.
stay tuned to your developments.
Great.
Michael Alexander, can Kevin give us a drinking window for all of his wines? I think he means release dates.
Yeah. So, or do you mean how long should they be aged?
It could be that too.
So the whites, I mean, in general, the whites are ready to drink that first year. And a lot of them will easily go 3 to 5 years and maybe even more. The reds, Chamberson is early because of its low tannin light body characteristic. That's ready to drink in the first year. So from the 2019, the wines that have not been released yet, there's also a Cabernet Franc, there's a Pinot Noir, and there's going to be a sparkling rosé. The Cabernet Franc is not ready to drink yet. It may be ready in 2021. It may even be 2022 before it's ready. Like I said, the red wines take longer. We've got a lot more dry reds coming out in future years. There's going to be a Bordeaux blend that's Merlot heavy, blended with some Cab Franc. We have Pinot Noir from the Lehigh Valley as well this year. Chamberson again. Well, the Chambersons. There's going to be a Chamberson like this one, and there's going to be a Chamberson Reserve from the Lehigh Valley grapes that came out of Pinnacle Ridge's vineyard. So I bought all of Pinnacle Ridge's grapes this year. As a side note, Pinnacle Ridge is closing. They're selling off the business. So that's an interesting fact that I will get to a little bit more here in a second. So yeah, hopefully that answers that. I make the wines to age, so they have acid to go, because the components of an ageable wine are really acid. You need acid and you need tannins or phenolics. And that basically gives you the runway to go. So if you don't have those, the wines fall on their face within a few months, and then that's kind of it. So.
A bunch of questions are coming in right now. And to Beth, yes, he did say that this may be the only kosher Chamberson in the world. And Adam Messer wants to know, where do you source your corks? There's an interesting question. Pat Casper, can you tell us all the varietals and percentages in the wines? Boy.
Well, yeah, of course I can tell you all the varietals and percentage in the wines, but please email me after this and I will get back to you, because that'll take some time to do that.
And then Cindy says, I love Pinot Noir. I want on this list.
Yeah, so the corks are DM corks. I find it's a pretty good cork that seals the wine up very well for many years to come. Pinot Noir, yes. So there's a 29 Pinot Noir. There's only 3 cases of that. The 2020 Pinot Noir is from Pinnacle Ridge's vineyard in Lehigh Valley. There's 1 barrel of that, but it's going to be years before that's ready. So stay tuned, stay on the email list, and keep following us.
Let me see. Robin and Rich Meadows, wouldn't we all like to be at a place where we can see each other in person? Oh, well, of course. Yeah. And let me see. Cindy, I will be ordering for Christmas right now. She has mentioned, she loves the whites, but she has also mentioned your sparkling rosé on several occasions.
Yeah. So actually, let me continue with the story here, and we'll get to more of these questions here in a sec.
Okay, go ahead.
So like I said, we moved into our new space here at the Bridgeworks Enterprise Center in Allentown in February, March, and COVID hit, but we kept going. So this was our first bottling day here. As you can see here, Bob again and Ronnie, our kosher supervisors, and we do all the bottling by hand. So you can see here, this is Bob filling bottles by hand on a force spout filler. So it's a very simple technology, but we find it makes a very high quality wine. So that's what we do. It's gravity fed. You're just filling up the rosé and filling up the cases. Some of you may notice that, like, if you open up the Chardonnay, the top of the cork was a little deformed. So that's been fixed. That's a result of the corker you see here, which was the corker I used to use at home. And these corks were apparently too good for this corker. So they kind of destroyed the corker, and we were forced to get a new corker that puts the corks in beautifully. So that's kind of the story behind that. You'll notice some of our Stella, some of our Chardonnay, they kind of look funny, but the bottles are sealed. I want to get to this because, as I said, this whole time, the story of all this work going back to 2014 and this idea of having this winery, all the work that went into this, and all the times I felt like this was crazy and I'm in way over my head and this isn't going to work. And all the times I thought about walking away from it. And, you think about all the people that we met and the connections that we made and the opportunities that came along just at the right time to make this possible is really miraculous. And it really goes to show you that this was meant to be, that Binah Winery was meant to exist. And so going back, to 2014, 6 years ago, I had this idea in my head that we were going to have this commercial winery. And so here, this was the first bottle that I labeled, and it's here in my hand. And so this was the moment I was trying to get to, and it was rush to get to this point at the last minute. And then all of a sudden it was there, and this moment passed, and I'm holding this bottle, and all of that ambition and that passion and all that work that we had all put into this was finally here, and we crossed that line. And then all of a sudden there was a lot more bottles, and here we are. We're a winery, it's real. And so we have these bottles, and so we continued through the spring of 2019 and the summer of 2019 and got all of the 2019 vintage bottled. And the business plan was that we were going to double capacity going into harvest 2020. So jumping up from, say, 1,000 cases up to 2,000 cases. So doing a lot more wine. And I was able to reach out to vineyards in the region. My philosophy is that I'm going to use East Coast grapes. I'm not going to get stuff from California. If you're going to make California wine, you make it in California, and we're not going to make American wine or any of that. So we're going to focus on the East Coast and get fruit from here. We had the grapes lined up to come in, and we needed more tanks. So as I mentioned, Pinnacle Ridge is closing, selling itself off. And so I was able to come in and buy the new used tanks from Pinnacle Ridge and brought them in here into our space and got them ready for use. And a much bigger press that we were able to get in. So this can hold about 4 tons of crushed white grapes. And I was bringing 4 or 5 tons of grapes in here this year at the time. Here's getting some used barrels from Pinnacle Ridge, where I used to work, and putting our brand on our new equipment. And then we were ready. Here's harvest of 2020. So you can see just in 2 years, that picture in harvest of 2018 when we were on my side porch with that little press. Now here we are 2 years later, bringing in grapes by the ton, here with the forklift. That's a half ton of grapes you're looking at right there. And we brought in, I estimate, 35 tons this year. I have well over 6,500 gallons of wine in the cellar this year. So you can see how fast this operation is growing and how far we've come in such little time and producing the quality, this very high quality product that you're tasting here right now. By any measure, this has been a resounding success, this idea. And I'm very, very, very happy and very thankful for all the people that have helped along the way and have supported this idea and really come together to make this a reality. So again, here you can see Ronnie, one of our kosher supervisors here. I don't know what these could be. Well, these weren't Cabernet. I think this was Merlot. This was Merlot. So this was Merlot that we got from Kent Island down by the Bay Bridge in Maryland. It's going to go towards our red blend that will be coming out in years to come.
You have a lot of just well-wishers and platitudes coming in from all over. Bernie has wished you good luck on your continued growth.
Thank you.
And let me see. We've got, and he commented as to how quickly you advanced, how amazing that is. And Beth Ledger says, so proud. You have a wonderful future and quality wines. And Cindy Shingler mentions, thank God you didn't walk away. You have some great wine.
Yeah, I think there was a few times.
Yeah, and Bernie says he would love to taste that rosé. Is the rosés available, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the 2019 rosé is available. There's about 17 or 18 cases left of that. So we're going to keep drinking that, and as soon as that sells out, then we'll get to the 2020 vintage. I have over 800 gallons of the 2020 vintage in tanks, so there's plenty more when that runs out.
Here's something that's been a thought in the back of my mind. Cindy Shingler, who is also on the board of directors with the Pennsylvania Wine Society, says we're not able to have our annual Pennsylvania Wine Excellence Awards this year, which is an event where we recognize the top wineries in Pennsylvania. We have we judge the wines and then give out awards. And she says you definitely need to compete in this event when the pandemic ends. Samantha has comments that this is a nice event, delicious wine. Thank you so much. And Beth Ledger again, can you taste by the glass at the next door tasting place?
Yeah. If I can interject there.
Sure.
Following on that comment. So, you know, this has really been a really exciting event. I'm glad that this virtual wine tasting worked out so well, and I've had a really good time doing this with you all. And I can say, if you really liked our wines, then, you know, please tell your friends about what you found here. And spread the word, because we really need your help to spread the word about this, this gem that you found here. And so we're actually running holiday season multi-packs at special pricing through the end of the year, which you can see here on the left side of the screen. They're found on our website, binahwinery.com shop. You know, they make great gift packs, so you can get this for family or friends and share it with them. And if you really like Marty's pick, that's the fourth one down here, you can see. And if you order, you know, there's a space when you check out that you can actually add a gift note, and we'll put that in the box for them and send that out to your recipient. And you know, the holiday season is also for self-indulgence, so if you want to get some for yourself, great too. You know, but follow us on social media. Here's my email if you want to reach out to me directly. But you know, if you really enjoyed this and you've really enjoyed these wines, then please spread the word. You know, support a small business during COVID here. You know, it's a challenge for all of us right now. So support a small business, and you know, please spread the word. We really rely on you to keep this going forward and keep making great wines in the future. So
anybody that's interested too, you know, you can always contact me, and I'll forward your contact information to Kevin. Lynn and Bill have an interesting question. What varietal is in the rosé?
Which vintage?
What varietal?
Which depends on the vintage. So
I'm sorry, I got you.
So okay, so the rosé for 2019 was actually, they had a lot of Deschanac planted in there, which is kind of similar to Chamberson. It's Teinturier. It makes red juice, and so that it was mostly that. There was also, so how I make the rosé, and it's very popular in Pennsylvania, is called the Sagne method. So when you're making red wine, what you do is in that first day, within 12, 24 hours or even shorter period, you'll actually bleed off some of the juice from a red wine fermentation and take it to a rosé. The primary purpose of that is to make a more concentrated red wine, which is very important in our cool climate. As I said, we skew towards the underripe end of the spectrum. So, you know, we tend to lack in color, we tend to lack in tannin, we tend to lack in fruit flavors, bold fruit flavors in our reds, because our growing season is so much shorter. We have less sunny degree Sundays, they call it. So this technique actually makes a more concentrated red wine, because you're taking some of that juice off very early on, and what's left is more concentrated. So what you take off, this Sagne, it's got some of the pigment of the red wine in it, so it's more of a pink juice, and then you're able to blend that in. So the 2019 rosé was Dichonat. There was Chamberson, Cab Franc. There's also Pinot Noir in there. And there was also a little bit of a Blau Frankish, they call it, also known as Lemberger here in Pennsylvania, they call it. And that's an Austrian grape. And that was actually blended with the Cab Franc in 2019. So there's a lot of different stuff. In the 2020, it's mostly Chamberson, but then there's some Merlot and Cab Franc and Pinot Noir and these other grapes that I've also used to this Saugny method blended in as well.
A couple other positives here. Robin in Rich Meadows says we're going to order several bottles of the white when this is over. Thanks so much. Sherry Olinger, continued good luck. I'm thoroughly enjoying the Stella. Cindy Shingler, Binah is my new go-to. Stephen White, thank you. Jerry Bennick, my favorite is Stella. All very good. Lynn and Bill, Stella is stellar. Cindy Shingler, thank you, Kevin and Binah. And Stephen White, again, well, this is a private message, so I will pass this along to you later. Thank you for a great presentation. That's from Jean Wennick and Beth Ledger. This is a wonderful program and tasting. Great job.
That's my mother, I should note. Thank you, Mom.
Well, good. And then thank Jerry Bennick. Thank you, Kevin and Marty. Great program.
I spelled job wrong.
And
Spell job.
Can I interject once?
Buzzed.
Can I interject?
Go ahead.
So I want to make the last point, so I know, because
Yes.
some people are excited about
Say that.
wines that we have going forward and looking forward.
Did Jeannie say?
So as I said, we expanded capacity
Great program.
to 2,000
Right.
cases.
A greater grape.
Mom, can you mute? Mom,
Maybe I'll do all the drums.
Jeannie's
All right.
like, wait till the night of the meeting.
Mom. Mute. Okay.
She's laughing, wait till the meeting.
Mom.
Kevin, are you still there? You'll have to unmute.
I'm here. Okay. So
All right.
looking ahead, so in the 2020 vintage, so like I said, I went and bought grapes from the region, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Lehigh Valley. So some of the stuff we have coming forward, I've got Sauvignon Blanc on the whites, Gruner Veltliner, which is a Austrian grape, which is gaining a lot of popularity here in Pennsylvania as well. We have the sparkling wines that are coming. So Blanc de Blanc, some Chardonnay at the Pinnacle Ridge Vineyard is coming in the future. And sparkling, so the sparkling wines I do in the Méthode Champenoise. That's the traditional method that they do in Champagne, France. I learned that from Brad Knapp at Pinnacle Ridge. They specialized in that there. So I was able to see firsthand and get my hands on and really learn how to make very high quality sparkling wine. Those are coming in the future. I want to make a really very high quality product. That's kind of the philosophy at Binah Winery as well, that we strive to be the benchmark and really the best. So I want to age those sparkling wines on the yeast lees for some time. So maybe 2 or 3 years before we get a sparkling wine out. But I promise you, when they come, they are going to be very, very high quality. So we have to look forward to that. What else do we got? Oh, reds. There's a lot of reds coming in the future. So as I said, there's a 2019 Cabernet Franc, and when that's ready to drink, we will release that. We also did that again in 2020. There's Pinot Noir coming. There's that red Bordeaux blend coming. 2 Chambersons coming in the future. So one like this and one reserve that has a little more with the oak, playing around with the oak. What else do we got? Rosé. We got rosé, more whites. 2 Chambersons. Oh, so are not Chamberson, Chardonnay. So this Chardonnay that we had today was unoaked, more like a Chablis. But I also am doing a Chardonnay reserve in the future from Lehigh Valley grapes, and that is going to be oak aged and malolactic, so more of your traditional Burgundy style Chardonnay. So lots of things to look forward to in the future. You know, a lot of great wines. So stick with us going forward. And
Okay,
then,
so we've only got a few minutes left before, because I actually set this up for 2 hours originally, and
yeah,
so and we're getting there.
here we go.
So again, I want to thank Kevin and everybody who participated. I know we've probably lost a number who've dropped off already. We had 46, we're down to 31.
Wow.
viewers right now, but at any rate, and I think I failed to mention at the onset that, you know, we're doing this in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Wine Society, which is headquartered in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we do these every other week on Sunday at 3:30. So we'll have more shows like this coming up. So if you enjoyed this, you can certainly reach out to us if you're not a member, and we can add you to a mailing list and get the information to you so that you can participate in future virtual wine tastings. Kevin, do
Thank you, Marty.
you want to mention do you have any parting words for us before we go home?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see if we forgot anything. We mentioned the awards, the kosher, the philosophy, all that good stuff. I think we covered everything. So, I mean, thank you, Marty, for having this again. Thank you to everyone who participated. You know, hopefully you really enjoyed the wines and you're really excited that we have such a great wine producer here in Pennsylvania now, and kosher as well. And then,
It's really a pleasure to introduce up and coming wineries that, you know, a number of people on this, a number of viewers today may not have even heard of you before. And that's the part that really excites me, is now they know about you.
right. And if you really enjoyed this, tell your friends, tell your family and friends, you know, you can help us a lot. So we really rely on that word of mouth. If you think you found a real gem here, then please spread the word. And the wines are only going to get better from here. So we have a lot to look forward to.
So again, Kevin's contact information is on his website. And if you got the initial notice about this, the initial announcement about this program, then you've got contact information for me, Marty Cook, and you can reach out to me and we'll add you to the mailing list. And Bob Harris says, thanks to Binah Winery, all great.
Thank you.
I think they finished their wine. They ran out of wine.
They finished all 3 bottles?
Yeah. So you have to buy more. All right, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll bid you adieu until the next time.
Thank you.
Take care.